Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Tracy Show. I have a bit of a cough, so I'm going to take a quick drink here. I am Tracy, host of this show. I don't know why I'm coughing so bad. I am joined today by my guest. I will let him introduce himself here in just a moment. But before I introduce or let him introduce himself, I have a whole host of announcements. First announcement is for my birthday bash, which is my birthday's the 4th of January, but since it's on a Wednesday, Saturday, January the 7th, I am doing a virtual murder mystery party. It's at 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's free to register, and you can just go to tracymedia.com/r-events for the link. Also, remember to support our crowdfunding campaign. We are trying to raise $100,000 for our scripted series and 2 other short-term series that we have in mind. So you can also go to tracymedia.com for that. Remember to support me on Patreon. That starts at $2 per month. It goes up as high as $35. And most importantly, please subscribe. I am at 96 subscribers, which means I need 4 more to get to 100. I have struggled for about 2 weeks to get to 100. We can do it. Subscribing literally costs you nothing. Just please subscribe, and I'll probably say that about 15 more times during the show. Join me on the 31st of December for my New Year's Eve show. It'll start at 11 o'clock. That will be live on our YouTube page. So if you can't remember that address, just look on the YouTube page. I'll talk about the good and the bad. Anybody want to come in? And if you want to be a guest, I am desperately seeking guests for 2023 because election 2024 is coming. It's coming really fast. So I need to get guests booked for that. Email me at TracyMediaLLC. The Say What Awards, where we celebrate the best of the worst, is January 12th, 2023 at 8 p.m. live on YouTube. And finally, for those who feel led, you can always drop me a few coins at my Cash App, $TracyMedia74. I got all of those self-promoting things out of the way. How are you today?
Well, I'm doing great. It's great to be here with you, Miss Tracy, and everybody who's listening. I am in a very interesting part of the country in Miami, Florida, the tip of the spear. That's as people like to say.
And tell us about obviously your name because you haven't said it yet, but you can see it. But I want you to say it. Your name, what office you ran for, and then we'll get to our questions.
That'd be wonderful. If you can notice, I was a little distracted. I was going through all my YouTube accounts to actually subscribe.
Thank you.
So
that's 97.
I may have just gotten you. I'm trying to get you to 100 before the end of the show. So I think that's a good goal. And so, of course, as it says right here, my name is Hector Roos. I'm in Florida. I'm the former or recent Libertarian candidate for governor of the state of Florida. I'm also on the state board of the Libertarian Party of Florida as an at-large director. So basically, that just means that everybody in the entire convention decided to vote for me, or elected me. In other words, they had their vote there. And it's interesting since Florida is basically the kind of this political epicenter after California is, I believe, in the sense of where either one of those states go, the country goes, really. And so we're, libertarians have a role to play here, and it's just like our brothers and sisters in Georgia who are fighting their fights with runoff elections. We too have to represent and show the Sunshine State is actually about showing people exactly what the ugly government they have here and elsewhere looks like, and try and do something about it.
Yeah, and I want to go all the way back to when you first decided or you were approached about running for governor. What was your what was your concern about running, and how did you address that concern?
Sure. So Florida has such an influence in politics nationally that libertarians and really needed to have a seat at the table. Uh, Actually, so as part of the Libertarian Party of Florida, we were trying to recruit a candidate for governor back in 2021. Really, after COVID and after seeing that, really, what ended up happening is Florida was bribed by the Biden administration to carry on a bunch of policies. In the people still don't say post-COVID era, right? But into that in that environment, where you have the our health aid care agencies in the state of Florida still listen to the federal government. We have mandates in regards to we especially at the time in terms of schooling and in terms of health mandates there. And in fact, it was so bad that by the end of 2021, it was the Department of Justice that was putting out statements calling angry parents meeting at, protesting at school board meetings domestic terrorists. So guess what? That's Florida. And we had and we've been wanting to push a conversation about really what does liberty mean in terms of we have an out of control government in DC, not just in Tallahassee, and we needed a state. We need this conversation about states' rights again brought forward, where we can really take stand on our own. So and Florida again has been the limelight. So when in the conflict in Ukraine, the war between Russia and Ukraine, we had a battalion actually deployed in the Ukraine uh, days before Russia started bombing those same positions. So and they just moved right over to Poland, and the whole conversation is, from the libertarian standpoint in Florida is why are we over there? Not only should they be withdrawn, we should pass defend the guard. Now not only should we pass defend the guard, but we should be utilizing our guardsmen appropriately, not on aggressive wars for commercial gain of private industry. Those I mean these are the conversations that have happened in Florida, and ultimately we recruited a candidate. He didn't announce, so people didn't really hear about his name. I'm not going to put his name out, but and we thought he was one of the most fantastic people that we were ever able to recruit. Unfortunately, he had some conflicts, some family issues, and that didn't work out. So come 2022. So why did I decide to run? Well, I happen to be the chair of the candidates committee for the state party, and recruiting candidates is part of what my job description. And at the same that same month of June, leading up to the qualifying period for that election, what did we hear? We heard that the U.S. Congress was going to pass a national red flag law based on the Florida standard. So Florida passed red flag laws, and I'll explain what they are in a moment. That said well, basically they basically copied and pasted. That's literally what the congressional leadership said. They copy pasted from the Republican state that passed red flag laws about 4 years ago. And the red flag laws, for those who don't know what they are basically a in some places they call them like they call them some like protective orders. There's an extraordinary protective orders. In this case, what it means is that someone can basically, someone close to you, someone who has an axe to grind against you, someone who has some personal knowledge about you, can make a complaint to the police about you, and say you own guns and you are a danger to the public, and they just have to put it in writing, and the police can just turn around or the sheriff's department, for that matter. That's what's happening in Florida, and they take it to a judge. The judge just literally rubber stamps the request to issue a red flag order, or actually in other states are called extreme protective orders. That's what it is. And basically, the police then takes this order, knocks on your door, no notice, nothing, and says, "We're here for your guns. Turn them over. This is a list of what we think you have." And if obviously you don't, you go to jail, and they'll still take the guns. And when they take the guns anyway, they give you a little note that says that you have 2 weeks now to find an attorney, and argue before the judge why you have to, and actually sue the government, why you should have your guns back, your property back, and explain why you're not a public menace. So, in other words, this law basically declares you guilty without any evidence whatsoever, really just hearsay, someone accusing you. The governor, of course, of Florida had been on board with this type of law, saying it works. He's a big believer of it, and of course, a lot of people are saying we're working on him on Second Amendment issues. Uh, Now, of course, my reason for running wasn't only that, is that when the Congress came around and said they want to do this, no Florida Republican really ever said a word in opposition to what was happening in Congress. They kind of tacitly went along with it, and I like to say that the Republican Party or Florida, being a Republican-run state, is among Republicans the most unfriendly to the Second Amendment, to the franchise of self-defense in the entire country. That says a lot. There used to be only 2 states that were run by Republicans that actually had these kind of red flag laws. The other one, I believe, was Indiana, and they repealed theirs. And so Florida's it. Florida's the last one's run by Republicans that has this kind of law in place. And of course, the whole year had also been about talking to the legislature and the governor about trying to pass a constitutional carry or permitless carry, which means you don't actually have to ask permission from the government to defend yourself or carry a firearm with you. In any case, that's, I will tell you, I never anticipated that. A lot of people have added a lot of other reasons for why a libertarian should run or shouldn't run. And I'm still having these conversations, even after I qualified in June, all the way up to, just last week, when I'm doing these elections in review kind of conversations. And I'm always kind of interested in, Tracy, because we've talked before on other platforms, about these kind of elections. Really, what does it mean when, for libertarians to run generally, too, and really what is the purpose of it, and what's the definition of winning even? So I'll tell you one thing. Oftentimes having a candidate is a victory in and of itself. So a lot of affiliates are a lot of the party is basically changing. It's changing from people who have been at this since the 70s to people who've been at this since the early 2000s. And as the leadership of the Libertarian Party, like look at the chair, right? The chair is even younger than I am, and they've been involved for about a decade in politics. So that is a national party, right? We're looking at the new mother of Angela McArdle. But anyway, so we showing up. There is a lot of purpose to that. It was the first time in a long time that Floridians actually had two candidates for 2 statewide candidates that they could choose from on the ballot, and that means something. Just showing up, that saying that we exist means something. Just like if you had why do we say the national election, the national party exists to run people for president, for national office. The state parties exist to run people for statewide office, and of course lower office from there. So really, there's a longer term vision when you think about these things. We're here to stay. We're planting a banner, and I feel that we have a lot of things to do. But honestly, we do have a path forward to do them and to leave a meaningful impact. And I couldn't be prouder of this moment, of living in this moment when we can see people seeing the failings of government really, and how far we've come from free markets in this country, and really the idea that we have been, that a common decency and civility has been supplanted by, this kind of rhetoric, divisive rhetoric that just like own the libs or simply it's just nasty. It's not even substantive. It's just like I don't like your mother, so I'm not going to vote for you. I'm like your mother smells funny. This. I mean, I remember it feels like a Monty Python skit sometimes in the political arena, and I mean that from whether not only in social media but really in real life now, right? We're seeing these impacts, and people really just get tired of it and they tune off. And I'll tell you, most Americans are not involved in politics whatsoever. I remind people everywhere I go, half of all voting age adults in America are not even registered to vote. Half the remaining people are registered but don't vote either. And you're dealing with a very narrow segment of the population who even change their mind, who are even persuadable. So it's this is a moment where really what it comes down to is we're not going to change the system through traditional politics. we have to live with that. We're going to change politics because the market's changing, because culture changes, and because people demand something different. The same way they demand service on a point of a button with like Amazon is the same kind of service they're going to look forward to the next who's going to provide them services elsewhere, and that includes government, because government is just a service that unfortunately we are coerced into participating in oftentimes. But the reality is that they every one of the services they can provide can be we can resolve it on our own and other means, and private means. And that's really that's our motto. We give us back the ability. No, we want to take back the ability for people to make their own decisions about how to resolve, be happy and resolve the problems they confront.
Now, when you make the decision to run, I'm always curious about this because I don't know the ballot access issues because in Florida, because I don't live in Florida. Where did you have to gather signatures or just pay a fee and you're on the ballot?
We have to pay a fee.
Okay.
We have guaranteed ballot access in our hard coded into our state constitution.
Okay, so that fee, can you mind telling us how much that was?
It was a little under $5,000,
Okay.
And I raised most of it. So and I obviously cut a check for myself to cover the difference. And obviously, I mean, there are other states that are less expensive than that. Like if like Colorado, they always remind me how inexpensive they are to run for office. Usually, all offices are really like $50. No matter how big it is.
Yep. And you didn't have to go. See, in our state, we have to do signatures. Sure. There's no guaranteed ballot access, so I'm always curious whether you have to do the back access or whether you have to do the pay a fee. I'm for personally paying a fee myself, just open notice. But there are some people saying, "Oh, well, you're weeding out people because what if they can't afford it?" But then I say, well, how many people does Florida have? Like, what's the state population size?
7 million.
Imagine trying to get a percentage of 7 million signatures. Yeah. That could not possibly. I mean, it could work because anything can work if you sit down and plan it. But that would just be a tremendous amount of. It would be difficult. Just wanted to get that out there for the audience.
It reminds me of New York, by the way. That's exactly what they do in New York. They have to get signatures every cycle to qualify for the office.
Yeah, we have
all minor parties.
Ours is 2%. Oh, I forget this. Somebody from Indiana help me out. It's 2% of who voted in the last Secretary of State's race. It's some complicated, makes no sense. I'm like, just ask them to pay $250. But I'm not here for that. I'm here to talk about their campaign grant. So what were some of the issues that you ran on?
Well, it ended up being that we obviously this past year we've had a serious issue with inflation. Cost of living increases were affecting all sorts of. We're basically triggering all sorts of laws that made it insanely expensive for a lot of people to live in Florida. So people, I was just receiving an article today about a lady who owns a home, owned it for years. Suddenly her property insurance went from $4,000 a year to almost $26,000 a year. Now, obviously her income didn't change. So, and that story is actually repeated often enough in the state of Florida that it caused thousands, if not tens of thousands of pre-foreclosures. In other words, people who couldn't afford to live in their homes anymore. And I met a number of people on the campaign trail that already lost their homes due to the increase in pricing to keep their homes. So what I mean, so when the prices of homes increase, everything increases along with it. The cost to replace them, the cost to build a new one, and everything tied to that. So it's mortgages, insurances. I'm going to cough in a second. So we had you had hundreds of thousands of ratepayers who were in, and we had basically had the entire private sector of property insurance, home insurance, the entire market collapsed. They said, no more, we're exiting out of here. no more new policies. It's going to be the state solution or no solution. And it's so bad that right now the state legislature is meeting in a special session to try and solve the problem, which just means a bailout. It just means more taxpayer money into the problem. They're not going to solve the problem. They're kicking the can down the road, the proverbial road. So that was one of the bigger issues. We also have we've had so housing was a big deal. Inflation, we actually had such an increase over the summer because of gas prices, right? So Florida led the South in fuel taxes. Guess what? I guess so. In other words, we're about almost $2 for if we're like, and so we're $1 between state and local taxes. We were somewhere around $4, about $1.69, yeah, $1.70 to round up, was about fuel taxes on fuels in Florida. So and this was also played. By the way, if this should have happened in Indiana too, because everybody felt this. Fuel taxes, generally electricity costs, everybody went up considerably. In Florida, sometimes it went up to 400%. So someone would be paying $200 for a 1,100 square foot home, and their local utility would suddenly charge them, plus an increase, plus a rate change, an emergency provision, and they had a monthly bill at $800. What happens? You don't pay that. You do a pay-as-you-go system. In fact, the entire state utility monopoly that exists, which is shared between FP&L, Florida Power and Light, and NextEra, and there's another one. They created basically a pay-as-you-go plan. Oh, we'll just equalize all the payments throughout the entire year and hope it doesn't. Hope that helps you afford this. These increases. So in other words, they level out the increases. You still have to pay a lot more money, and these are the things that basically, when you're dealing. I keep telling people that. And by the way, lastly, property taxes. By the way, the Libertarian Party. One of the reasons why I decided to run was because there's some things that even Republicans used to talk about in the state, which was abolishing property taxes or bringing it down to zero. Florida has higher property taxes than the state of California does, because effectively, basically, when they measure how much people make for a living and they say, what's your tax rate? And they look at the two and it says, per how much people make in the state of Florida, you are paying more in taxes than people in California are. And, obviously people want to hear Florida is doing great, that they're the free state of Florida. And, and it's great. People who are coming here, who are selling their house for top dollar and somewhere else, are coming to Florida and spending their money here. And it's great for them because they're able to get bargains from people who basically can't make it anymore here. And where do they go? So, and we are the oldest state in the country in terms of Florida. So we are, and what I mean by that is definitely the average. We are the retiree capital of the country. But people who are obviously on a retirement income, which is usually fixed income, are, they're the ones who are affected the most. Of course, working poor or just the working class generally are affected. So in other words, who's the state actually serving? It's serving people whose obviously income is, or economy is mobile. They can afford these kind of this kind of state, basic expanding and ever taxing state apparatus that's out here. I mean, and in the middle of all this, the hypocrisy that says, oh, it's not so bad. We're not going to have to. We don't really. It's not an emergency that we have to resolve now. But meanwhile, the state was claiming the highest surplus from tax revenue in their history. So something about $26 billion. So where did all the money come from? They taxed everybody. That's really what happened. And before that, during COVID, they were creating new taxes. Basically, Florida and Utah were the only states in the country that didn't have an internet sales tax. Oh, but we're going to put, everybody's going to start shopping on Amazon. I guess we got to change that in Florida, and now only Utah is the only state in the country without an internet sales tax. So, I mean, this is, at some point I realized this is a come to Jesus moment for people. We have to have a campaign. We have to run a campaign on issues that really affect people and call out the hypocrisy both the left and the right. So Democrats are a failed opposition party in Florida. right? You can see it because they couldn't even put a decent challenger up against Ron DeSantis. And on all these issues that actually exist, the working class issues, that if you are in the Midwest, or if you're in the Rust Belt, these are bread and butter issues that people like the now new Senator Fetterman won on, right? So, but what happens in Florida is that people think, people think too cosmopolitan. They think that it's the issues that they're concerned of theirs are the most important issues. And you know what? A lot of libertarians do that too. And it's lessons to learn. And this lessons to learn nationally. I want to point out, Republicans did great in Florida, but nationally they did not retake the national government. The must-win elections, like in Arizona or Pennsylvania, Georgia even lost. So this is, Republicans also have to look at this and say, where do we go from here? Because frankly, they want, they're not offering anything new, and what they have in Florida, I've always said, and now people are starting to agree with me finally, that Ron DeSantis has been running for president more than he is trying to govern the state of Florida, and that's that is what the future of really what our politics looks like. People who don't really care about the needs of the actual people, the everyday needs, and forget about education. I'm not even going to get there because COVID kept kids back for years. It's hurt the economy so badly that we're still going to be living the ramifications for a decade. But ultimately, this election was more about 2024 for most people. Even the people who voted for like Ron DeSantis, that would otherwise vote for a libertarian, were voting for Ron DeSantis because they wanted to stick it to DC who was actually, in fact, this is the greatest takeaway I had from this election was that people chose the career politician Republican who does nothing but tax them, who closed their state, who told their churches to close, who put police on, who put state troopers on the border to prevent people from coming in and out. This is the protest candidate that they chose to protest DC because they think that mattered more. DC is causing them more problems than the policies of the state government in their lives. That's a tremendous tremendous disconnect of what is actually happening in the state of Florida, and I'm sure it gets heard quite often in other states too.
Now you said something that I have to go back to, and if you're watching, you can post your questions in the comment section. I will do my best to get to them. So you said something that was very interesting. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds as though you're against property taxes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, got it. So my contention has always been, because I'm a lefty, I'm always going to be leftist. It's never going to change for me. But in my train of thinking, when you don't have taxes, that's less revenue coming into the government. That's less money that the government ideally could be spending on services.
True.
How do you make up that difference? How is the difference made up when you're not taxing? I don't know how much Florida gets from property taxes. I think you said it, but I must have forgotten it. Whatever that money is, if you just eliminate it, that's money the state isn't getting. Now, of course, every state could spend its money more wisely, stop spending on bogus things. But how do you, in general, make up for that tax revenue that's gone?
It's a good question. I'm glad you asked it. As like I said before, the number I threw out there, about $26 billion, is the ongoing surplus the state of Florida has. In other words, we do not have a revenue problem whatsoever. Obviously, we're taxing too much already, and we're already overfunding our services. We simply, really do have a public corruption problem in the state of Florida when it comes to how money is allocated. Now, in other words, we could take off, we could end property taxes or abolish property taxes in the state of Florida, and it would not, you would be looking at the funding for what we of what the state had 3 years ago, that's really what the budget would look like. I mean, that's not a that doesn't sound too harsh. What I will say though, the reason why I target property taxes is for two reasons. One is that property taxes in the state of Florida, at least, they're used predominantly to the quote unquote pay for education, right? Or
Yes.
pay for, and it's in Florida, it doesn't work that way. It's collected that way, but it's not diverted to education. Instead, it's actually diverted to the general revenue fund. So you have a lot of politicians who then get together every year and they reallocate that money. They redistribute the money, and they redistribute in a manner that's not transparent, and it's not trackable. In other words, for every dollar you spend, you don't see where it's going in your own public school system. You don't. So it's not transparent. The second thing about property taxes is that it's not fair. It's not a fair form of taxation. It's regressive, like the income tax. So in other words, it's not linked to your ability to pay. The more money you make, the more and it's actually not even based on your ability to pay. So again, your property value increases not because you've done anything, but because there's somebody in a property appraiser's office that says, "Oh, there are more sales of properties that are now high, that have now somehow created a liability for you." And I don't care if you're retired. I don't care if you make minimum wage. I don't care if you're a disabled veteran. You are going to pay this, or us politicians are going to take your house away. That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous form of taxation. And frankly, people who spent their lives building a house, paying the financing of the house, finally own it free and clear, never have a right to actually own it, because the government again can come here and confiscate it if simply you're not making enough money for them. That's sad. So property, that's my only reason about property taxes. Florida actually makes most of its revenue, in any case, from sales taxes. We do not have a income taxes in the state of Florida. So and most local governments actually do have their own local option sales tax, but most of the revenue that they receive, if they're a touristy area, they will get ample taxes, ample services, revenue from services like Miami Beach, right? They would have 60% of their funds that would come in just on taxes and their convention spaces and all their tourist revenue. But for the most part, every other local government really has a lot of intergovernment transfers, meaning money is coming in from the federal and the state government to operate to their operational expenditures. On top of that, they have bond revenues. They have all sorts of different kinds of revenues. And the reality comes down to is this something we can go without? And I think property taxes is something. We have so many other forms of revenue that this is something that we can do without. And it's good for society. It's good. It's healthy. And frankly, it puts finally it makes the weakest among us first, right? It really does return us to those first principles of our common humanity, and both our moral and religious convictions.
Hello, Marlon.
Is that Marlon?
So, yeah, his YouTube name is First Love. Oh, I just had my other question. So when you talk about campaigning, you kind of answered you got into where I normally ask people to talk about the two candidates. So you had, oh boy, I know his name, there's Ron DeSantis, and Chris was the other person, but yes, his first name is just like, I can't remember it. But
Charles.
Thank you. Why do you and you can, here's what I'll say about Florida. Outsider looking at, don't live in Florida, never been to Florida, probably don't want to go because it's too many hurricanes and it's hot. I don't like any place hot. But when I look at Florida in terms of politics, it's just a red state. I don't see any kind of purple areas. Maybe Miami, possibly Tampa. But when I think of Florida, I think this is a red state. And your politics, to me, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they seem to more line up with the right edge instead of, more like on my side where I'm just like, okay, let's just was just take over everything in terms of government. How do you distinguish yourself from a? Because I figure how you can distinguish yourself from Chris. That's a pretty easy thing to do. But how did you distinguish yourself from Ron DeSantis when you were campaigning?
Well, there's a lot of obviously the pro freedom message. By the way, the entire election, every candidate running was running on a pro freedom message. We want you to have the freedom to have reproductive rights. We want you for you to choose, right? We want the freedom. No, we want the freedom for you to not have to put on a mask. We want the freedom for you to not have to deal with some federal mandate. And the freedoms I was talking about was I want you to have the freedom to not have your house stolen from government. You know, I want you to have the freedom of actual true medical freedom. That in the case that there's another medical emergency, the state doesn't have an automatic right to basically put you in a concentration camp, for lack of a better word of it, or and decide for you what your medical treatment's going to be, even though you have your own medical professionals that you are paying to treat you. And that too many times that happened in Florida. And frankly, none of the other candidates were anywhere near my position on cannabis, on psychedelics, on those issues of medical freedom, on certainly on education, on real parental rights. They're nowhere near my position. And certainly when it came to taxes, again, they had more in common on taxes, on regulations. In fact, the Democrat was trying to say that he, as a former Republican, that he would basically do what he did back then when he was governor, because Charlie Crist had been governor prior in years past
That's
as
right. He
Republican,
was governor before.
and he was trying to make the case that he would be basically the better of the two worlds.
So the lesser of two evils argument.
If you like what I did back then, you should vote for me again.
Okay, so not
and you forget. No. He was definitely saying that all the problems that we're seeing around them, I fixed when I was governor 10 years before. There's a problem with that because honestly, go back in time. Did anybody really like that? Like really like what we're like everything? If you're trying to say what you did 10 years ago and you can't really say what you've done for me now, done for me lately, then people are just not. That's not a very convincing argument. But the guy who's governor now is saying, "Hey, I'm writing all these checks and giving them away to people. I'm protecting you from the big bad Biden administration, and on occasion I will give lip service to medical freedom in a time when people are looking for a hero on this issue, right?" So, like I said, that election was nationalized very quickly. In other words, that you had to respond. You couldn't. Voters really, and whether the media was obviously participated in this. They really wanted to nationalize issues along issues of make it basically a vote on whether you like what was happening in D.C. or not. And if that's the case, if you like what was happening, you would vote for Charlie Crist. If you didn't like what was happening, you vote for Ron DeSantis. But what if you don't like either one of them and you don't like what any of them are trying to do in Florida? Then the media really made a loud effort to basically support and frankly, I think the media was more responsible for electing Ron DeSantis by such a wide margin because the guy had a team that would work with the media constantly to create publicity stunts that frankly were in some cases inhumane, right? So what do I mean by that? So I don't know if you remember the story about him putting his team putting a bunch of refugees from Venezuela onto planes and dropping them off in the middle of the night in Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. Well, that was completely illegal. Absolutely. You think the media ever said one thing about it being illegal? No. They ended up regurgitating points of these people who feel victimized are going to sue, rather than say this governor's out of control, right? They never really parroted those issues. I actually ended up having to sue the governor over that issue too. I was the first lawsuit up because he had no real authority under law to go into another state and create this whole program and spend taxpayer money from Florida in another state. Didn't have any authority to do that.
I'm so glad
no governor up. No governor has that authority.
I'm so very glad you brought that up because what I couldn't figure out, and again, I don't live in Florida, but I would figure, I'm like, Florida has a border issue. I would think people coming from Cuba to the United States. That's just my first train of thought because Cuba is right there next to Florida, and you would think, okay, that makes a little bit of sense. But from my understanding, these um, people came from Texas all the way to Florida. And that made no sense to me. And what didn't
Right.
make any sense was nobody raised how much money were Floridians spending for his publicity stunt. I'm like, they're letting him get away with that? I mean,
Yep.
it had to be a good 30, 40, I'm just guessing, 30 to 40 million. Maybe it was more than 100,000. I'll put it that way.
So, so it's been calculated. Other publicity stunts have been. There's public records to define how much the free publicity was worth. That one about from the taking the refugees in Texas. They were never in Florida to begin with until
Right.
they were brought here temporarily and then transported to Martha's Vineyard. But that publicity, I believe, was worth $26 million
No, I'm
for him.
talking about the cost of
Oh,
Floridians. Like,
oh,
how much did you all pay for
oh,
that?
direct cost so
Yeah,
far is 12
direct.
million and counting.
I'm sorry, how
12
much?
million and 12
Oh,
million and
that's
counting.
a little. That's a lot lower than I thought. Still too much. Still too
Right.
much.
No, no, no. It's because there wasn't a big allocation of funds for it. But again, we only know how like a tenth of that was even spent at this point. We don't know how all the money's been spent. That's the weird part of it. Like there's a lot of secrecy behind this. They somehow some third party had hired basically like a government contractor or an ex-military contractor that was like a former spy to convince all these people to get on these planes in the first place, to really manipulate them. And it's really spooky the way that whole thing went down. But like I said, publicity stunts aside, I mean, the most vicious publicity stunt I ever saw was the way he handled the response to Hurricane Ian, which was a Category 5 storm, a hurricane, meaning that its average winds were about 180 miles per hour, and it gusts up to an excess of 230, 240 miles per hour. I mean, this is it's basically it's taking hair off your arms if you're out there in a wind tunnel like that. That's how fast it's going, how fast the wind's blowing, and there was an incredible mess up in the way they were supposed to announce evacuations, and that hurricane landed in the oldest part of the oldest state in the country. And to this day, we do not know how many people actually died. They will not release the numbers, but it'll be easily the deadliest hurricane in 100 years. And is the media talking about it? No. Instead they want to talk about how quickly they're recovering and all this stuff. I just actually spent a weekend in that area myself, or just now. They really did clean up a lot, but what about the lives that were lost? Who's accountable? Basically, they basically they knew the hurricane was going through there. They had every reason to announce evacuations, and they held off announcing evacuations to about 12 hours before landfall. So if you are 70 plus years old and you have medical issues, you have mobility issues, you have prescription issues, you're on a ventilator, heart monitor, any of these kind of complications, and you are in an area about to lose power, I'm there. Let's just say it was inhuman what they did to those people. And the deadliest thing was, no matter if you were near the coast, you were getting 10, 12 feet of storm surge. People I know who almost had their houses were 14 feet above sea level, and they were like an inch away from the water entering into their homes. And this was a real thing, and there's really no accountability to how the governor and his administration responded to that catastrophe, that loss of human life. Instead, he was rewarded because the media again played up a national story of him versus the Biden administration. You know, I kid you not. We have to get away from. I keep saying this because it really feels like if we had a media that told the truth, if we had a way to be able to go out there and tell the truth to people, and give them a solution that this is what's going on, and this is the solution, and obviously they're lying because what is it that Marxism cannot exist in a government that has to tell the truth. So, and when we don't have the truth available to the public, it's hard to keep government accountable, or it's even hard to change it. And that's a sad reality. And now I will that from sadness I will tell you to hope. Let me take you to hope. My hope is also that we have the markets have also uh, basic brought solutions, social solutions. I mean, whether it's uh, and I firmly believe we're going to see a new economy rise up out of the ashes of the bad dollar that we're policies that we're seeing that are taxing people's savings and their futures really with this massive inflation rate. I'm not sure what you've been seeing, but if you're looking at food prices and shortages now, I was talking about we're seeing a double-digit inflation in food, energy, year to year. It's pretty consistent at this point that we're going to see it for the long term. Even the government statisticians and economists are saying we have inflation that's going to be around for another 5 years at least, and won't be under control by the Fed until that time. That means that all the that means that if we're going to have a store of value, if we're going to store up wealth, we're going to make money and hold it. We can't rely on the U.S. dollar during this period of time. That's literally what even the worst government data or scientists are saying. Data scientists are saying. So what's the reply? The response is really how do we have created the markets created a new currency that's different cryptocurrencies, particularly Bitcoin, which for all the ups and downs you see in it, you can see it, and it's transparent. And they just arrested the what that Bankman guy, the Bankman-Fried, who was the CEO of FTX in the Bahamas. They just arrested him. It was yesterday, and but you never see the manipulators of the dollar get arrested like that. You never see that kind of transparency dealing with the U.S. dollar currency. So you tell me which is the safer, more transparent currency that you can enter in and out of? No question. It's no question. Enough people do that. Enough people enter into this marketplace where they're exchanging freely between each other in a dollar alternative, and we can see a lot of people start building up wealth and starting to transact with one another because it's also a social model. You're building up new communities around really just freedom, and what you do with it and how you want to have your local government actually work with those currencies. One of my biggest calls was to have the Florida government start switching over to a Bitcoin standard and start transacting. It's just allowing people to transact with the state government instead of dollars with Bitcoin, and it would just move the needle further and further and further away from irresponsible, basically the new money changers of today's society, the ones who tell you what your life is worth, right, based on this dollar. So I have a lot of hope for what's coming in the future, and I would never have thought that it was going to be something so different. That's the great thing about the future. You don't really know what to expect sometimes, and I think just like the Bitcoin could be the future, the economy of the future, Libertarian Party can be the party of the future, because we're actually just talking about the future anyway. Things are happening without us. So if we just stand over there, everyone's going to come meet us where we are waiting for them.
Yep. So I do want to kind of move on in terms of the progression of the your campaign you ran. I don't like to assume, so I won't ask it. Did you take part in any of the debates?
So there were 4 candidates for governor. There was only one debate between the Democrat and Republican. I chose to do 2 debates in Spanish, actually, with the 4th candidate who was running without a party. So we did that. We actually we had our debates broadcast on Spanish-speaking media in Florida and actually internationally, so people would actually hear what's happening in the state in our politics. Because honestly, when I heard the invitation, I was like, that is useful, because if you have a blockade of information within your own community, the best way to do it is just blast it everywhere else, and eventually gets back to you, back to your own home community that you're looking for. And we certainly got the word out, and the metrics that were shown to me were millions of people across the world were listening to it from the Spanish language perspective. And Florida has, I'm sorry, I actually said earlier 7 million. That's how many people typically vote in the election. It's a lot bigger. It's a lot bigger. It's closer to it's closer to 20, and we actually out of that we have about almost 7 million of them are of Hispanic descent or came from a Spanish speaking country. So that's a huge population that I thought it was good to actually reach out to and talk to.
I do want to lastly talk about, because usually when I interview candidates, they have a difficult time getting onto the debates. They can't get on them. They aren't invited for whatever reason. Then they have to pull a publicity stunt. That's the only publicity they got. But since you are actually had a debate, not with the two candidates, how, I don't even know how to ask this question because it just came to mind. Since you're looking at the election from 2020 vision, what's the one thing that you think you could have did better?
In this recent election, if I was going to do it, I would have liked to have started earlier, and that's it. Because I did run with the intention of being the protest candidate, and I definitely could. I saw I could have been more than just that, with more time and had time to develop the team to really run a stronger statewide campaign.
Yep. Now, when you assembled that team, did you have like a campaign manager, canvas workers? Like, what did you have as a part of your team?
So I organized because of the time crunch. What I did was I organized around the strongest affiliates in or Libertarian Party's county affiliates, and worked with their members to get the word out, to host events, and I definitely coordinated with other campaigns that were happening throughout the state as well. So I definitely piggybacked on, and I definitely felt like that we were all contributing to the same message, and we're united in in our messaging as well.
And at this point, I usually give 3 issues to a candidate, but you've already answered 2 of them. So I got to think about what other issues where you stood on them in the campaign. Here is a unique one. So you talked about the Hispanic community in Florida. But how do you think, or how do you assess that your campaign did with other people of color, i.e. the African American community?
So that's interesting. I had a couple people come up to me and ask me on several issues. Some of it was like related to race relations or criminal justice reform or even reparations. And to tell you, and just to be perfectly honest, I leave it up to, on each of them, I answered exactly what they wanted to hear. Actually, that I wasn't going to lie to them or tell them what they wanted to hear. Right. What I said to them was, we have a problem in the state of Florida, where we still have so many. We do have a criminal justice issue and a social justice issue, obviously connected. I know you're in Indiana, but we still feel the effects of Jim Crow in our laws. They're actually still in the books, and in the last 2 years, the Republican legislatures passed several laws, really criminalizing protest or the speech of protest, assembly, and frankly, it's just giving license to sheriffs who want to. Like I said, like red flag laws earlier, right? Well, some sheriffs are being so bold now that they're going and creating pre-crime databases where there is a computer model that is identifying homes where there are people who may commit a crime soon because they have the disposition, they've had a record, and guess what? They get a knock on the door, and they ask the deputies ask, "Can we search your place? Can we come in? Can we talk?" And obviously, that's incredibly intrusive, but it's the same type of intrusiveness that says, but and that's on the criminal justice side. On the social justice side, we want to talk about. Republicans always historically talk about, lifting yourself up from your bootstraps, right? MLK would, respond to that old saying by saying, "Well, how can we lift ourselves up if we don't have any boots?" And when it comes down to it, is that in the state of Florida, we have so many uh, uh, barriers to entry into the workforce. And what I'm referring to is a license, occupational licensing restrictions, to such an extent that it doesn't affect not just minorities, not just people uh, who are Black, African American, but anybody who's just not already in the system. So you had, during Hurricane Ian's recovery period, you had a white guy with a crew of 40 people come in who was a professional roofer from Texas. He came in into the storm ravaged area saying, "I'm ready to work and help you guys recover as quickly as possible." Next day, he was arrested for unlicensed activity of roofing because, despite recommendations for almost from 25 years, the state legislature still bans out-of-state roofing contractors coming into the state of Florida, and they've created an entire mess of where Florida has become the the fraud capital of the country because it's so difficult to actually do business and business like occupational businesses, whether it's hairdressing, beauticians, or the trades, right? Like roofing, electricals, that it's just easier to commit the fraud. And when you commit the fraud and the work is actually shabby, where's your redress? And so you want to talk, that's another way of saying that fraud is causing insurance rates, housing values to actually increase because the pool of contractors are smaller, the pool of qualified contractors are smaller, and who's that really benefit? It only benefits the people that are already contracted, that already have these licensing, and ultimately it hurts the people who really, by the way, who really need the work, right? When we're talking about, Florida has a large prison population. We're talking, we have high recidivism, meaning that people who come out of the prison system go right back into it because there's no opportunities for them. We've always had to check the box if you've been convicted of a crime or convicted of a felony, and we have a system a criminal justice system in Florida where people uh, obviously it affects every whether your housing, ability to work, your housing, ability to work, ability to get credit. I mean, these ideas were it's. I remember, so when I was in high school, I remember the first time I ever read the Economist magazine, and it was a shocking number for me that 1 in 2 adults in America had been in jail at one point in time, and that's still a lot higher number. We still have a higher number than that even today in Florida, and the mandatory minimums are hurting everybody. And once you're a kid that does gets caught up in the wrong way, your life is forever scarred. Like your opportunities they shrink incredibly. And I think this is an issue that we have so many issues on that end in Florida that it's hard to pin down which one directly to try and affect. Uh, and ultimately, I think it's we have to stop looking at government solutions because there is no intention in the government space to actually solve anybody's problems or to reintroduce them in society or even to try and properly educate them because if I don't know how many times have you heard that of a school shooting in Florida, uh, or some kind of incidents in Florida schools, or just how well Florida schools are doing in the country, and we're like 48th. 48th. That tells you a lot about what the future of Florida looks like. So I hope that answers your question because it's a passion issue of mine. Um, yeah.
Follow up question. And this will be the last follow up question. And remember, everybody, to put your questions in. And subscribe to this channel. I said I was going to mention it again. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. So you said that you don't believe that government is the ultimate, like the answers for our social ills or economic um, issues can come from the government. Where would they come from?
Well, it's interesting. I'm going to say something that sounds a little old-fashioned, but your parents, your faith leaders, your community leaders, people that you look up, that are held up to in esteem, to regard as models of society. I mean, who are models today? And you tell me what our community looks like as a result. I mean, it's just I'm not trying to peach. I'm a libertarian. I say live and let live, right? But to what standard do we want to live by, at least, right?
Understand. I think I'm
right.
asking that question because what I often find, not a slight, but this is just my impression. You can take it whatever way you want. When I hear someone libertarian say that, I'm like, okay, so you're saying government is the problem, but you want to run for office. That seems kind of like, well,
Right.
wait a minute, that doesn't make sense to me. Because, well, obviously, as a leftist, that's kind of like my first train of thought. It's like, okay, because I agree with you, answers can and should come from the community. But
Sure.
communities don't just happen to have billions of dollars just sitting around to address those issues either.
Oh, that's certainly a good point. When libertarians run for office, they do so for a couple different reasons, and the clearest reason that it's always been right from the beginning, with the founding with David Nolan, was to educate the public, right? So, in other words, no matter what, because at the end of the day, whether it's you making a decision for yourself or government making a decision for you, that is to say, a politician, a bureaucrat making a decision for you, someone is making a decision, right? So we all have to understand that if we're going to live with the choices that are being given to us by a bureaucrat or a politician, we have to see we're still required to ask the simple question: is this right for me? Is this can we do? In other words, is this right for me? Is this the best I can have for myself? Right? And the question of getting out of social mobility is always a question of can I have more? Can I do better? Is this everything? Is this all that I can live up to? And ultimately, those questions are not encouraged, are not something that is encouraged necessarily by government. The government says, "This is what you deserve. This is what we can offer you. You should take. This is what this is basically your lot in life, right?" Uh, if you're outside the government space, the mentality is different. It says, "Where do you want to be? Who do you want to be? What do you want to do?" There is no limit, and in government spaces there actually is a limit, and so it's just a mentality issue. I'm not, I think there are places where there are that government works as a, as basically social glue because everyone's just used to it, right? It's the culture we surround ourselves with. It's usually our culture, our traditions that make government what it is. And when traditionally, when I don't even care if you're a conservative or libertarian or even or even a socialist, when you have too many people on the bureaucratic side, on the political side, making decisions, then it goes, hey, wait a minute, what's this for? Who is this for? That you're making these decisions for? No one here ever asked you for any of the solutions. No, and who are you to tell us that they're the most important things that you should be paying attention to right now, rather than education, food, public safety, those damn roads?
Yep. Yeah, like I said, I didn't want to present it like I'm just coming, but I'm like,
No,
but
it's fine.
that's always a thought of mine because I'm like, well, okay, it's a problem. Our government is terrible, which is why I started this podcast
Right.
in the first place. It's terrible. It doesn't benefit people. But our time is up, and before go ahead.
No, I'm saying government does benefit people. The
Rich
question
people.
is who
Yeah, it doesn't.
exactly?
Yeah,
Like
it
it's
does
who?
not.
What class?
It does not
It,
benefit the working class and the poor. Definitely does not.
because they don't have any representation.
Yeah. So remember, everybody, this is the last episode of the Tracy Show until because we're coming back in 2023. I got to get the date here. We're coming back January the 17th. So that means I'm still looking for people to interview. If you want to be interviewed by me, because 2024 is just literally around the corner, email me at tracymedia@gmail.com. Please. I am literally out of interviews, so I don't want to invite my other guests back because they won't come back. I don't know that to be 100% certain, but I still want to expose our audience to as many third-party candidates as possible. Um, I do want to thank everybody for watching. Um, Before I ask you to give your social media handles, are you planning on running again for governor, or is there another office that you are seeking?
It's possible if Ron DeSantis runs for governor the way he's been. I think he's going to run for governor. That there would be a special election for that seat in 2 years in 2024, and I might think about doing that again.
Okay. And now you can tell us where we can find you on your social media handles.
Thank you, Ms. Tracy. Right, I'm at Roos for Florida. So I'm Hector Roos. I'm a libertarian here in Florida, formerly the candidate for governor here. My handles are Roos for Florida everywhere on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and I'm sure I'll be finding some more from some more social media outlets like that pretty soon. I am starting essentially a PAC, and I'm going to keep going on the road to talking to people, even if I'm not running in 2024. So I'm going to be out there still doing the work and still talking to people about the issues that you've heard me discuss today with Ms. Tracy.
You don't have to call me Miss Tracy. I'm not old. I promise I'm not. I want to thank everyone again for watching. Remember to like this video, comment on it if you tune in after this show is live. I'm not going to beg for people to subscribe, but yes, I am. Subscribe to this channel. I want to make 100 subscribers so bad. It's just like, let me end 2022 in a good note so I can, build up to 2023. And remember, I have a huge announcement for the month of February for this show, and I'll be talking about it January 17th. Have a great day, everybody, and I'll see you later.
Tracy, guess what? You hit 100.
Oh my goodness! Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Oh, I'm at 100. Okay, so I'm gonna send out a big, huge email. But Hector, if you could stay on for just a couple of seconds after, because I got some follow-up questions I want to ask. Sure. Thank you, everybody. I'm at 100. Oh, we're gonna do a 100 YouTube special celebration. Now I got a plan for that. But we'll see you when we see you, January the 17th. But remember to join me December the 31st for our New Year's Eve celebration, 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to talk about 2022, what's going to happen in 2023. We'll see you. I'll stop rambling and then do cartwheels. Thank you all and have a great evening.